Good afternoon, it's Pat Mahone. I'm out here at the Lost Creek in Warren County, Missouri. And this is a very unusual area in which there's so many different types of ecologies, so we have many different species, and luckily this is a very hot spot for unusual species that you don't see every day. And I've already walked the majority of it today, and going to share some of the highlights along the trail, and we're going to hike our way on and out and cover as many species as I can come across. All right, here we go. So we're leaving a very just beautiful woodland area. Not a whole lot of diversity in there, unfortunately. Comes out to this opening, kind of like a prairie remnant. Here we see Baptisia australis, very common species. There may be Baptisia australis variety minor, which is the smaller stature. I'm not terribly sure if it's because of the rocky ground underneath, because these are on the edges of some very rocky glades. Lots of rattlesnake master in here. This is also a really great site to see the prairie coreopsis and also Echinacea simulata, the Ozark glade coneflower. That's a very nice opening. There could be a little bit more management. There's a Russian olive that needs to be cut down. I believe right here, it's not in bloom yet. They usually bloom a little bit later. Baptisia alba. It's very fragrant in here. Unfortunately, it's not because of the natives. There's a multiflora rose that I passed, but it's absolutely incredible. There's a nice red bud, exhibiting good color on the new leaves. They're typically an understory tree. A lot of people do try and grow them in their yards, full sun, and sometimes they have success. Over here, we have some, looks like wild quinine, those larger leaves here. And this is the last year's flower. For some reason, these aren't really flowering yet. They got some buds. As the name suggests, it was, I believe, used as a medicine for malaria. I don't know how effective it really was. A little bit more, some interdispersed achillea, or the yarrow, which is that very fine fern-like leaf. Those aren't blooming just yet. This is a Baptisia Brechtiata. It's a very, it's a smaller species of Baptisia. Has a little bit woollier leaves. We can see there's a leaf hopper. Well, it's not getting in focus. You'll have to take my word for it, but right here, whoop, and a skink. Lots of skinks out here. So now we're getting into like a rockier glade area. It's kind of hard to see under the leaf litter. Got lots of skinks. But there's, well, of course it's very dirty here, but it's a good spot for trying to find our native lady slipper. There was a single plant that I had found 2 years ago. And unfortunately, this last season, an orchid poacher came into this area and they seem to have poached the lady slipper, an entire colony of Plantanthera lacera, which is a fringed orchid, and some sporanthes, which are the lady's tresses. This isn't in bloom yet, but this is Penstemon digitalis. It's kind of out of its element. Penstemon digitalis is found in abundance throughout Missouri, but typically in rockier areas. So rock outcroppings right on the edges, right in cracks and crevices and flat parts. You usually don't see Penstemon digitalis in this woodland or glade kind of area. And all throughout, there's good populations here of the slender mountain mint. Very, very strong. We're starting to fade out from the open areas, and we get a little bit of dispersal with the wild quinine, and then eventually it just kind of disappears. Seems the champion in this area is definitely poison ivy and the Virginia creeper. Here we have a late blooming Phlox. I can't remember which species this is, but they typically are some of the earliest to bloom in the spring, and then they just disappear altogether. You try and go out to some locations and try and find a spot to collect seed for your garden, and it's gone. You can't find it. So even the ones that are just late blooming are very hidden in themselves. So the temperature right now is about 75 degrees, and here in this woods it feels like you're in the Appalachian Mountains. It's a very good temperature. You got the higher humidity, but it feels nice and cool. This is one of our favorites, Monarda Bradburyana. I think it's the wild bergamot. Might be bee balm. I can never remember the common names. Very beautiful species. Very very important for pollinators, especially this early in the year. You can kind of see the invasive. Well, nope, that's not the multiflora rose. That's the little blackberries. They don't taste very good. Coming up on some exciting stuff. Almost there. Another multiflora rose, an invasive species. Just absolutely takes over everything. This is a pretty decent site to find the orchids, but unfortunately somebody poached them all. They're relatively easy to germinate by seed as compared to most other orchids. It was very counterproductive. If somebody really had to have it, they just destroyed all the source of seed and proliferation. This is a native penstemon. Name's not coming to me right now. I'll mark the name later. These bloom very early. They rarely ever overlap with the blooming of Penstemon digitalis, and they typically like to be in non-disturbed areas, rockier areas, and sandier areas. Let's see, we have some pussy toes, which are those wide leaves here. Very small colony in this area, not very impressive. Another penstemon trying to bud out. All right, we're getting more impressive stuff. So this is another open area. I believe this was an attempt to take a remnant prairie, manage it a little bit better, and try and reintroduce some of the native flora. And today I came across this. I've been here four years now. I've never seen this. This looks like Asclepias amplexicaulis. There is a chance seeing those purple veins. It could just be an absolutely wrinkled-leafed purple milkweed. This is Asclepias purpurascens. I'm hoping it's amplexicaulis. The single stem on it and those wavy leaves, and how the leaves kind of come to a point, as opposed to most of the purpurascens. It seems like they're a little more broad. Hoping this is an amplexicaulis. There's not too much in this area this time of year. This area, though, every other year is completely covered in Sabbatia, which is a gentian species, and you can see all the pinks and the whites come up. I believe they're biennial species, and I mean, it's almost like clockwork that they'll just bloom every other year and you won't find them on those odd years. In this area, there's Asclepias tuberosa. I cannot see it right now. Maybe this is one. Maybe that's not. I don't think that is. They'll be up later. We have some more of the broadleaf or the plantain-leafed pussy toes. Kind of hard to see in here. We'll come across another colony. Or the penstemon. And coming up on my favorite Asclepias quadrifolia to watch. It's one of the largest in this entire area, and it's made a couple of babies around it. So here's one here. It's not quite blooming yet, so you gotta be careful walking in here. And it's just an absolute beautiful, beautiful species of milkweed. Grows in high amounts of shade. I've seen them grow in high amounts of light, so they're quite versatile. This plant here has been my go-to for 3 years, and it's just always puts on a great show every year. Every year it's just doing fantastic. All right, we're gonna go down and not step on anybody. Here's another little outcropping of Monarda. In this area, there's some very strong Asclepias verticillata, or the world milkweed, and they're also kind of a late season bloomer. But some of the largest plants I've ever seen in the state. Just absolutely huge. There's also a lot of ticks out here. I believe I've not flicked off less than 10 in the past hour. Many of them were I think they call them the Lone Star tick with the white dot in the center. Oh wow, well look at you. This is our native box turtle. A lot of them differ in colors, and all of them are the same attitude though. Curious, shy, and if you get too close and try and move them, aggressive. Let's see if we can zoom in without having to get too close. They kind of just do their thing. These are a turtle that I believe people try and keep. They're more like a gopher tortoise or something of that nature. And if you remove them from their home area, they kind of have a lifelong stress issue, which they're trying to find their home. This guy is out and about looking for a meal. Not too sure what they really eat. Oftentimes you can hear them while in the woods and never see them. This is an interesting sedge. Not too familiar with the sedges. This one has a very upright grass-like habit. Interesting little fruits. Sedges are they're hard for me to identify because all of them look the same to me. And I think we have no less than probably 4 species of sedge just in this frame. Here we have some larger ones. Those might be Carex grayi. I'm unsure. I have to see the fruits. And then there's areas like this. They're just very interesting to look at, very pleasing to the eye. And if you look even closer, there's just life happening. Little things going on. It's just very interesting to look at. It's one of the things, if you're trying to build your native plant garden, it's one of the things you want to achieve is trying to make it a habitat, a home, a refuge for all the native fauna. You know, your native plant garden is only as good as the fauna populations that you can support. So it's very important to make sure that you are getting the correct species, that you aren't just getting cultivars that look pretty with the purple leaves. You want plants that are going to support the wildlife around you. They might not have another chance for another mile. And a mile to us that's kind of a far walk, but a mile to them could be a lifetime or an eternity. Here's a nice little patch of the plantain-leaved pussy toes. I believe it's Antennaria, plantaginifolia. Very commonly used as ground cover, and it's very commonly killed by the homeowner. They tend not to do very well in most instances of being planted. As you can see, we're kind of getting into a rockier glade. Not too sure what this is. Very glossy leaved. Oh wow. In the background there's looks like a red leafed something. I think we need to go back in there. I did not see this. I'm going to just try and beeline through. And I'm going to avoid all... Yeah, this might be some sort of viburnum. Nah, probably not. Have to look it up. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at woody plants. It's kind of a whole different game. I'm gonna see why this it's an animal. Ooh. You have to be careful of bears around here. It's unlikely that they'll be around. They are here, especially in this county of Missouri. Well, we're just gonna have to appreciate that tree from a distance and kind of keep on going. Hoping that was probably a deer. It's very large. I'm just not in the mood to lose my life or try and run from a bear. And whatever it is, it's not really afraid. I hear a curious step it just made. Baptisia Brechtiata. This is a pretty decent area. More towards the summer. Lots of Liatris Scariosa that'll be coming up in here. And then the somewhat more uncommon or scarce in parts of Missouri, Liatris hirsuta, which was a former subspecies of Liatris Scariosa. Here's some Rattlesnake Plantain. These are a lot shorter bloomers than the Rattlesnake Plantain you typically see all around Missouri. And again, just like the Baptisia australis, is it because of the rocky underground that's kind of stunting it? or is it because, it's a shorter subspecies? I believe that there is a shorter subspecies, but it's found more south. But you never know. Species move. Here's another Asclepias quadrifolia, the 4-leaf milkweed. Now, after these are done blooming, they are approximately impossible to locate. So if you were looking to try and find a pod to grow some of the species, you should have probably marked it whenever it was blooming. It's always good to see Asclepias quadrifolia blooming. If it's on private land, mark it with a flag so you can come and inspect, see if there's a pod. The pods take many months to develop, and I believe it will be about October, if not almost November, before the pods are ready to be plucked and harvested. And you want that pod to actually dehisce on its own. You don't want to pick it early. I've tried working with Asclepias quadrifolia for 3 years. I had seed donated from Virginia source, and I got 2 or 3 to germinate, and they grew into plants, but they weren't really growing well in containers. They needed to be planted out, so I planted them out now. And but I've been collecting seed every year with 0% germination rate. It's just been awful. Here's a Baptisia Brechtiata. Has nice lower growth habit, little fuzzier leaves, and the yellow flowers are kind of hang closer to the ground. So they could be utilized very smartly in a landscape planting. Even if you didn't even have any native plants, that would still be quite the showstopper in your garden. Here's another Asclepias quadrifolia. Ooh, here we go. So this one is growing sheltered but full sun. Very adaptable species. And actually that one was kind of large with, looked like 2 umbels of flowers, maybe with a 3rd coming. Here's our Lanthus Scariosa. They've got weird looking leaves right next to a wild quinine. We usually don't see Liatris hirsuta at this point. Liatris hirsuta is just a smaller species, very similar flowers, but few flowered. And boy, is it about impossible to spot if it's not in bloom. We can see that there's some more Liatris Scariosa in here by these leaves. Not very typical Liatris-like leaves. That's not a very typical Liatris either. I believe the subspecies that we have is Liatris Scariosa subspecies neuwlandii. And the flowers are just absolutely incredible. Just incredible. That one's probably a skink. Making noise there in the distance. There's another skink. Never really see him. Oh, there he goes. Oh, that's actually a fence lizard, fence post lizard, which you see on, went into the leaves. Usually see a little bit more central Missouri and a little south, but they're almost always growing in association with rocks. This was a site where there was a cypripedium. As I said earlier, somebody had poached it. Really selfish. Really unforgivable. Coming up on another little outcropping here. You can see that there's this, the brome sedge which actually isn't a sedge, it's a grass. Nice cluster of the plantain leaf pussy toes. And this is what people are trying to get, trying to emulate in their gardens as a ground cover. And it just, see this dirt? It just doesn't work unless you got really terrible soils. And you might have a chance. More Monarda Bradburyana. A lot of historical stems in there blooming last year. Not that much this year. This is unusual. The previous winter was an extremely cold, strong, long winter. And as a result, we saw some really great blooming in certain species, especially Asclepias tuberosa. Just incredible, showing all across the state. Bradburyana, scattered amongst the poison ivies. There's quite a few dogwoods in here. Really love the dogwoods, but their bloom time is just, if you don't catch it, you ain't gonna see it. Here's another dogwood, another understory tree. Just all kinds of woodland in this area. If we were to go deeper, unfortunately, the species diversity decreases the further we go in. I'm not entirely sure why, because there's actually rocky ravines in there, things that are historically in Missouri just to be these absolute refuges of, you know, lilies and spring ephemerals and trillium and whatnot. This is a nice little ditch. This, unfortunately, there's not much species diversity in here. This could be Carex grayi, or it could be that cattail sedge. And when you're walking in here in summer, this is an absolute mosquito breeding ground. It's like being in the Everglades. Well, we're coming up on the end. There's not much more to show you. Maybe an occasional fern. This place really is absolutely fantastic in the summer. It has something unique to offer every season, which is absolutely fantastic. There's some areas of Missouri that are really great in the spring, and then the rest of the year there's nothing. There's some areas where it's absolutely fantastic in the summer, but it lacked in spring, and it has nothing in fall. And in this area, it'll surprise you with absolutely all kinds of beautiful species when you least expect it. So if you ever come across I-70, this is approximately a 8-mile detour south. You'll see a lot more diversity and interesting things here than you will at the Danville prairie area. Yep, I think we about, well, let's end on a spiderwort. Really, the spiderworts, they only bloom for about 1 day, each flower. But they produce so many flowers that it just feels like they're blooming all month. If you have a large colony of these in your yard, it's absolutely show-stopping. Unfortunately, they can really get out of hand. Well, I guess let's end on another little cluster of Asclepias quadrifolia. Well, thanks for watching, and come check this place out. Just don't take anything.